Kindly remain seated, please. We're about to begin with the next panel discussion for the day. On the topic, the digital backdrop, bridging the gap between the retail store and online marketplace. May I invite the moderator for the session? We have with us Mr. Sandeep Ladha, who is a partner and leader, India Technology and E-commerce for PwC India. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for our moderator, and the speakers will be joining him now. We have with us Mr. Abhishek Upadhyay, who is the Vice President, Business Development for Flipkart. Joining them, we have Mr. Karthik Jain, Vice President, Product Management for Infibeam Incorporation. Could you have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? The kudos is quite high in that party. And myself. May I also invite you here to have Mr. Sayan Athar, who's the Head Logistics and New Initiatives, eBay India. Joining them, we have Mr. Sandeep Juneja, Vice President, Sales and Marketing for Express India. And we have Mr. Neeraj Balani, Vice President, Sales and Business Development for Mahindra Logistics.
Thanks for the introductions. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session just before lunch. Thankfully, we have the session before the lunch, so that, and of course, we are standing between two things. Between two things meaning, one, of course, being the lunch. The second one, we are expecting a senior guest to be arriving just before lunch, so we will have to probably move slightly faster than we anticipated. And hopefully we'll have a time for question and answer. The way we'll conduct this session is probably we'll go around asking questions for the panelists, and then towards the end we'll leave some time for questions to be asked from the audience. So just as a backdrop to this whole digital gap, I do think that e-commerce has taken off extremely well in India, and just a few years into it, and I see that there is a huge amount of spur that you've seen, all of us have experienced, not in terms of investments, but also in terms of the consumer really going online, initially in the metro cities and now the tier 2 and 3 cities, to go online and experience what that person otherwise would have not experienced sitting in his tier 2 or 3 town. We are talking about the e-commerce industry, around a $30 billion industry today. There are talks of by 2020 it to be reaching about $100 billion, and by 2025 it reaching about $220 billion. If you see the global backdrop, today e-commerce in China is about $500 billion. We are just about 30, right? With similar type of demography, similar type of teledensity, similar type of the consumer population, which is younger population in India and in China. The US market is about $350 billion. So with that, being the goal, and we just being at 30, there is so much to go, right? There are challenges, and we see a slowdown in the market today in terms of investments, etc. But I do believe that those investments, it's a temporary phase, it's a correction phase as in any market, and we'll see better growth in the coming time. With e-commerce in the backdrop, and any car is only as good as the road is, right? So if the car is e-commerce and the road is the logistic sector, e-commerce can only survive only if the road is good, right? So here we are to talk about these two concepts and see what is it that are not only the challenges, but also what are the current opportunities that the logistics business sees in the e-commerce space, and so on. So maybe with that quick backdrop, I will probably open up the session with a few questions. First question being a question to everyone, and starting with you, Neeraj. So how do you see the e-commerce logistics market evolving in the last 2 or 3 years? And what are the key trends in the sector that you see? And how is digital shaping this whole business on the logistics side? So this question will be for everybody. We can probably have a quick round of answers, maybe 2 or 3 key bullet points that you want to really make so that we are able to move on to the next question.
Sure. Thanks. So I think we discussed this even before when we were thinking about drawing from your introduction to. I think the rate at which the market itself is growing, it paves in a lot of way for doing a lot of innovation as well as industrialization within the logistics space. And I think if you really ask me what are the 2 or 3 key drivers, I think the need of e-commerce companies to use logistics as a prime tool for customer experience, or the prime driver for customer experience and initiatives around that. That's on the forefront. And second, keeping a good mind or keeping a good thought process on customer experience. What are the best ways of optimizing cost? I think these are the 2 key prime drivers that I see in this entire growth fueled e-commerce market. And of course, the third thing is now with India being a complex geography, what are the key innovations that can come out from the logistics sector is again the third key driver. So we must have got a lot of press around how a lot of e-commerce companies are looking at various ways of reaching the customer in a right way as well as in the cheaper way. We got a lot of press around, say, models like the Kirana model, which Amazon has been trying out. So I think I would put these 3 as the prime drivers today in the last couple of years on the e-commerce front.
Sandeep?
So
Don't confuse between the 2 Sandeeps. It's very easy to distinguish between us 2.
he's a smarter guy, and
There you go.
for the people who are going to sit after lunch, in the after lunch panel, he's already told them that's not a good panel. So, luckily, we're coming before the lunch. All right. All right. And so as my mother often asks me, Beta, what is this shop called internet where you buy stuff from? And I often try and explain to her, and sometimes I open my computer and I'm shopping for her on the internet, and 2 months later again she asks me, so on that shop from internet where you bought my stuff from, can you buy this? So I mean, even older people are getting influenced by stuff like this. But I think trends like, and I've written a few notes on Robo, Sobo, sorry, I'm speaking stuff that you should be speaking. See offline, buy online, research online, buy offline, online to store, stuff like that. Purchase and pick up models in Canada and Quebec particularly. You click and go and collect. Imagine you go and some of these people can be blamed for that. You go and look for something on a website, and then you go on Facebook, and suddenly when you're scrolling, doing work on something, pops up from below. Do you want to buy this? And they're giving you a special offer. Hey, I went to your website a little while ago. Why are you following me on Facebook? But the fact is that of all the social selling worldwide, 64% of social selling is happening on the Facebook. So mediums like these are evolving. Omni-channel approach, 85% of online shoppers, they start a purchase on one device and complete the purchase on the other device. I mean, it's amazing stuff. And it's so said that multi-channel shoppers who start on one device and do the purchase on the other device, they shop more often and they spend 3 times than single-channel shoppers. Yep. So these kind of trends are evolving. Now, obviously, I come from a company which is involved in international logistics, which is DHL, and therefore, we do a lot of studies on the internationalization of business. And there's a study which was conducted by EIU last year, which says, and I quote 2 things, that for the small businessmen, and this therefore links directly with e-commerce, international trade is absolutely vital to long-term success. And 2, that countries like India, which is a part of BRICM, so to say, are extremely well prepared to leverage the demand of international movement of goods. Because and this is so interesting, because they say countries like, and businesses like Indians, their ability to navigate difficult circumstances is far higher than the ability of businessmen in developed countries. So here's a great opportunity, and I think e-commerce is enabling that. And I'm primarily talking from an international perspective. Borders are falling. We know that US raised their de minimis levels to 4 times. Australia is at a fairly high de minimis level. They want to come down, but I don't think they're going to come down. I'm not going to talk about Brexit right now. It's pretty hot in the news, right? But that will have different kind of implications altogether. So imagine this. A large marketplace suddenly decides overnight that I'm going to open the global markets to the Indian suppliers, right? They switch it on. They switch on the global market. Some of the marketplaces are also sitting on this stage, and I'm sure they'll talk about it. But looks, I'm a supplier. Millions of customers suddenly open up to me. I have to offer the right product. Yeah, but you're right, the right road has to be there. But I think supply chain is evolving. The different demands that e-commerce companies are putting on supply chain providers. There are a lot of challenges for traditional supply chain operators, which they are encountering when they come to e-commerce. And I'm sure we're going to chat more about that. But I think it's a super exciting word. And if I may add something more to the statistics you presented, just to tell about the scale. So in India, for example, e-commerce to retail is 1.6%. In developed markets, the e-commerce, let's say US, e-commerce to retail, if I'm getting my numbers right, sirs, is about 11, 12%. It's 10 times. And the studies show that we will grow in the next 5 years by 5 to 10 times. Now that's amazing stuff. So for a small businessman in India, the Indian market and the global market really, really opened up, and its supply chain, and we discuss more implications on that. If we are providing the right solutions and we stay high on the learning curve on the supply chain solutions, I think this is the trend for the next 8 to 10 years.
Okay. You want?
Okay, so I represent Flipkart. One of the biggest things which has happened in the last 2 to 3 years from a e-commerce perspective is the phenomenal growth. We as a company have seen almost 10x growth. Almost all others have seen similar kinds of growth. And the growth has come in two forms. One is the number of categories, number of customers that are shopping online. But the other growth, which is even more interesting and continues to really amaze me, is the growth that is happening in Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns. We are seeing today that Tier 3 to Tier 2 towns are growing at a faster pace than the growth that we've seen in the metropolitan cities. As an example, Gurgaon, which is possibly the city with the best e-commerce density today. 3 years back, there will be about 1,000 shipments a day kind of volume that Gurgaon would have. Today, smaller cities like Guntur and Vellore are having almost similar shipments per day. Now, what both of these do is obviously increase complexity of the network, because customers at each of these locations are still not ready to compromise on either cost or reliability or service. So their expectations are same. So it creates multiple dimensions on how do you really design your network to ensure that you're servicing demand, which is coming from all over the country. The second thing which I feel has happened is customer expectations. They are really increasing. They are demanding more and more for less and less. Earlier it was delivery within a couple of days, then it came next day delivery, now it's same day delivery. Soon it will be delivery within a couple of hours. On the convenience flexibility side, it's all about I want to be delivered, like you were saying, Sandeep, on order offline, pick up online, the reverse, vice versa. I am not at home, can you give me a slotted delivery, can you give me cash on delivery, credit card on delivery. There's like multiple forms of conveniences that customers are asking for. Again, the delivery mechanism for that is through the logistics companies and logistics providers. So that's the other dimension that's there. The third biggest change that I'm seeing, and which is automatically trying to address the cost aspect that you just talked about, was the movement from air to surface. 3 years back, almost 95% plus of movement was really being done by air. Obviously a very costly mode, and now to get, but a reliable mode ensuring speed, which was one of the biggest factors for e-commerce shoppers. Now if I see, almost 70% of movement is happening by surface, and the changes that have happened there is, innovation has driven a lot of change. A Bangalore-Delhi route about 2 years back would take minimum of 96 hours with no reliability of whether the 96 hours is really going to happen or not. Today, through technology of almost things like driver relay models, which companies like Rivigo are bringing on board, we've got the same route getting delivered in 48 hours time. A driver is driving for 6 hours. There are specific relay nodes where the driver gets off, somebody else gets on, and now the journey is being continued within 48 hours. So you've reduced cost and not compromised on speed. So if you look at all of this, the implications on logistics companies is how do you ensure that you deliver things at the fastest speed, most reliably, and try to optimize cost, because customers are not willing to pay anything more for all the things that they're demanding.
Great. So I do agree with all the panel members here. I am Karthik Jain, representing Infibeam. I think there are three key notable things that have happened in the last 4-5 years. One is the overall e-commerce ecosystem has actually just multiplied, and the biggest factor for that are really two. One is a great amount of smartphone penetration, right? With 3G and 2G, 3G connections, actually the rates going down. Facebook and WhatsApp has been the major drivers for people taking the 2G and 3G connections, because of which, smartphones as well as the internet penetration itself has actually multiplied. If you look at, 4 years back, majority of us were actually shopping on laptops, right? And that was the only device for really shopping online, right? If you look at the penetration of laptops versus TVs in a particular household in India, it'll be 1:10, right? But if you actually, and if you consider that, every household in India will have a TV, every household will have at least 3 to 4 phones, right? So your internet penetration has gone from 1/10 to really 40 or 4, right? So there's a huge shift of demand that has started coming from your devices, so your entire device has changed. Earlier it was laptops, now it is smartphones, right? More number of people really are now shopping online. So that is one. Second is that when that happens, then an essential element in a transaction that has to happen in e-commerce is actually the payment. What has happened in India again is that with the introduction of COD, right, many of the shoppers who were not able to shop online earlier have been able to do it now, which is where the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 growth has really seen a significant boost. If you look at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities today also, there's a lot of aspiration to buy branded products, which was completely unavailable to them earlier, right? With the introduction of e-commerce companies, better buying facilities, just a click, and then your order really comes to you in 2-3 days, the growth has seen a tremendous pattern for all the companies actually. So I think this is one of the reasons where the consumer patterns have really grown in the last 3-4 years very, very rapidly, which has led to a lot of number of shipments for us and the logistics companies as well. Second is that the logistics infrastructure itself has significantly improved. Companies, even the traditional companies in the logistics industry, who were considering e-commerce as a very small segment of their market share, they have seen a very, very high steep growth curve in the last 3-4 years, right? And they have significantly started investing in the technologies which are required for single deliveries, individual deliveries of products, right? Which comes in various shapes and sizes. So a lot of investments have actually gone in the last 3-4 years, and I think it will continue to grow and going forward as well, which will really define the way we will be able to deliver, stuff in a cheaper and a faster way to all the customers. So that is the second trend that we have seen in the last 2-3 years. And third is that, we've also seen that global players have started coming into India and coming up with best practices, right from, the entire customer experience, from ordering online to really delivering, within specified time frame. Hyper-local has become very important. So going forward, you will also see a lot of deliveries happening within hours, as Abhijit also mentioned. So I think those are the trends which are really notable in the last 4-5 years and going forward as well.
Sainath?
Hi, I'm Sainath. I represent eBay. So for e-commerce to be more efficient, right, it is important that the logistic is more consistent in terms of the support it offers, be it fulfillment, packaging, cash management, return management, so on and so forth. So if you look at it, logistics is the only interface which is a physical interface between two virtual entities, right? Therefore, it plays a major role in reducing any risks associated with this virtual relationship. In terms of evolution of logistics, I think e-commerce has played a very significant role. It's been a key influencer to the changing dynamics in the logistic world. Case in point here, a lot of you guys already pointed it out, is COD, right? That was an ask predominantly from e-commerce industry. So for all the known reasons, right? Apprehension to buy online, low credit card or plastic card penetration, and the heavy cash economy that we operate in, right? So that was something that e-commerce was pushing hard. And today, if you look at it, today if you look at the logistic world, or any company that you take, right, has COD as part of the standard offerings. So that's how the things have changed. The other example I can think of is, for example, return management, another very critical issue, right? It's an Achilles heel for all e-commerce companies. So, previously any discussion that, so at eBay we have the shipping program, we call it as PowerShip, which is an intermediated shipping program. We tie up with multiple logistic service providers to offer us various services. So previously when I used to talk to them and explain them why returns are important, why you should cater to returns, the typical answer would be, sorry, that's not my forte, I don't want to get into it, right? But look at the market today. Today there are so many services just within returns. There are pure play players only focusing on the return shipments. I mean, that's how the market has evolved. So to that extent, I think both in terms of services and technology, e-commerce has played a very critical role as far as logistics is concerned. Another key thing which I wanted to point out here is the kind of relationship that we have today with logistic service providers. And this is what we discussed earlier also, the relationship today has moved from a client-vendor relationship to more of a partner relationship, right? So today, both of us, the logistic partner as well as the e-commerce companies, are working to a common goal of delivering a great customer experience at the minimal cost possible. But that probably wouldn't have been a mandate for a logistic company about 3 years back. But that's how it happens today. Today, you have a discussion with logistic service provider. He'll be the first person to ask you, what is it that you need from a customer perspective, which I need to build into my services? So again, that's where the market has moved to, and that's how I think the entire ecosystem has evolved.
So just picking the thread from there in terms of the customer experience, you talked about, all of you talked about quite a variety of points, but just picking up the thread, and maybe I can now go on for individual questions, is around the customer experience. So to you, how do you see, because there has been a humongous challenge, two key points as you also earlier alluded to, is the quality of the service that you ultimately provide and the timing of the service. Right? Yep. Now, when the customer is going in a store, obviously he has both the things in his control. He sees the quality of the product then and there, and the timing of it, he's buying it there. He's not getting it delivered to his house. Right? So when he is going online, the difference is that he wants, in his mind, he may not say that, he may not think consciously about it, but when he's ordering, and we all have been in that process, is that he would love to not only click it online, but get a look and feel of it if it is possible, and eventually get it very quickly. As you rightly pointed out, maybe few days to whatever, 48 hours to now 1 day, and now a couple of hours, and somebody is even talking about doing 1 hour delivery in the same city on certain identified items. Yep. So, so this is all about customer experience, relating to your point, Sainath. So how do you see, Abhijit, that companies are trying to bring in better customer experience, trying to bring or deal with some of these challenges, and what is it that the 2 or 3 things that the company should be doing for them to really be up the curve and trying to balance competition out?
Sure. So let me just introduce a concept of Net Promoter Score. That's how e-commerce companies worldwide measure customer satisfaction, because that's a critical indication of really how a company is performing. Just for the audience, a Net Promoter Score, or NPS as we call it, is really a score on a scale of 1 to 10, where if a customer is scoring 9 and 10, he's called as a promoter, because he's most likely to promote your product to a friend or a relative. If you're scoring anywhere between 1 to a 6, he's a detractor, which means he's not liking your service, and most likely will tell somebody else not to buy it. And 7 and 8 is like the passives who are liking it, but the chance of switching to somebody else is very, very high. So an NPS is basically percentage promoters minus percentage detractors. That's how the industry terminology is. And NPS can be measured at various lengths of the entire supply chain, right from order to delivery. So right from the way you're able to search your products, to the ease of navigation, to payment online, and then the experience of delivery and post-delivery. Since we are talking of logistics here, let me just focus on delivery and post-delivery. So when we've done a deep research, so we do about 3.5 lakh, we reach out about 3.5 lakh, 4 lakh customers every single day. And obviously understanding what is it that makes them happy and what is it that does not is very critical for the success of Flipkart. So when we looked at the post-delivery NPS drivers, the highest significance was on specifically 2 parameters. One was speed basically from order to delivery, And I'll deep dive into what was speed from a customer's perspective. And second was product quality. And again, I'll talk about how do you really measure product quality in an environment where you're selling lakhs and millions of items and there's no way to judge quality. So when it comes to speed, the interesting insight was that a customer doesn't care whether there's a breach or no breach. He has a notion of time. And in his mind, if you cross that notion of time, even if you've promised him a specific day and you've delivered before that day, he's not liking it. To give an example, it is much better to promise 3 days and deliver possibly in 3.5 days versus promising 7 days and delivering in 6 days. So buffering your supply chain to ensure that you're meeting your SLA promise is not good from a customer's perspective. And another interesting parameter is that if your delivery promise days crosses 5, the NPS drops by 50%. So in his mind, it's like if I'm getting an item while I'm shopping, if the delivery date is showing 5 days from the date of order, the chances of he ordering is very, very less. So now speed becomes extremely critical, and hence, how do you design your network, how do you design your supply chain to ensure that you meet the speed parameter is going to be extremely critical. So that's really from a speed perspective how important it is and why e-commerce companies are talking about next day delivery, same day delivery, and delivery within a couple of hours, because that's really something that matters to the customer the most. Second is, of course, product quality. And the only way to measure product quality in the e-commerce world is seller ratings. So as you see, when you go on a e-commerce website, there's stars which happen across all the websites, and seller rating is a proxy to product quality. So the better the seller rating, the chances of the customer buying that product are very, very high. And both these parameters, the only arm of the e-commerce company which can really deliver that is the logistics service provider. And the third, which really again drives the NPS up or down, is the retention or the resolution if there's an issue that happens. So if there's a contact that a customer has to do to a contact center, number one, the moment a contact happens, it means it's bad, which means that there's something which has gone wrong. And the two things which will normally go wrong for which a customer is picking up the phone to talk to somebody is speed and quality. So if you're able to address both of these things, then automatically your chances of not having a customer contact is very, very good. And again, if the customer contact does happen, then resolving that within 4 hours is critical. Otherwise, again, the NPS drops by 50%. So that's really the sense of what I have in terms of what e-commerce companies and their logistics service providers or their in-house logistics companies should be focusing on for ensuring that customer satisfaction is on a high and you keep on improving your NPS, which is really a driver of how your business has to keep on going up.
So speed and quality are
Most
the two
critical.
most
Most
critical
critical.
items. From a experience perspective, is what Flipkart thinks. Moving on from there, also looking at speed from a slightly different dynamic in terms
Sure.
of how technology is used.
Yep.
Right. For both these items, in
Yep.
terms of quality, of course, it's the quality of the product.
Right.
But from a speed perspective, I think technology becomes very, very vital in terms of how it is used at the back end by a logistics company or by an e-commerce company, and how the two are probably integrated along with the suppliers.
Right.
So just on that, in terms of, what are the key technology, and Karthik, this question is to you, what are the key technologies that, logistic companies are investing into, whether it is robotics, automation, integration with, this whole ecosystem, etc. So what are your thoughts around
Sure.
that?
See, as e-commerce companies, as well as logistics both, right, we believe that e-commerce is, we are more technology companies into the retail business. We are not retail business as such, right? Because we are,
Completely agree.
we are actually technology companies who are enabling retail to grow that pie much larger, right? And enabling consumers to transact in a much seamless way to make them more products accessible to them and make the products reach them much faster, right? So we are actually technology businesses into the retail, technology companies into the retail business. If you look at a consumer, there are two facts that will always remain true, right? Which was true yesterday, today, and even remain true tomorrow, is the customer will always demand lower pricing and faster delivery. These two will never change.
Yep.
Be it you, me, or anyone else, right? And all the technology, all the efforts that we do is actually to optimize on these two parameters, primarily, right? By bringing a much larger selection on every product. If we do these two things, I think we have made it, right? So I think almost every e-commerce company is trying to do these two things. Having said that, if you look at an order life cycle, right, when a particular person or a consumer actually places an order, there are at least 15 to 20 steps that happen in between before the product really reaches the consumer, right? And every step is very critical in terms of making sure that the right product reaches the right consumer at the right time with the right material inside, the right shipping label, invoice, everything, right? From the right supplier. So all these aspects, right? If you look at the order life cycle, once the order is placed, it actually goes into a workflow, which is now it can either go to a seller or it can go to your own warehouse if you're actually doing fulfillment by your own. Post that, your inventory gets checked. There are automated workflows where pick lists are generated. There is a sorting area. Packing happens. Packing again comes in various shapes and sizes. Post that, you're invoicing, shipping labels, barcoding the solutions, handing it over to the logistics partner, whether it is internal or external, tracking it to the end, customer notifications within all this time. Now, all these things happen within 24 hours, right? Most of the times.
Or less.
Or less. Actually, it happens within 2 or 3 hours only, because the shipment is where the last leg, which takes the most amount of time. Because if it is actually shipped today from one city to another, then your largest time is actually the shipment time. All of this happens within probably a few minutes, right? So that is one. Imagine this is happening for one packet, but the scale is enormous. Abhijit talked about 3 to 4 lakh shipments a day. We do about 20 to 25,000 shipments on a daily basis. So that scale is enormous, and I think that scale is just going to go up, right? With millions of shipments being actually handled on a daily basis. Now, having said that, automation in all of these processes is very important, right? So I think what we will see going forward is, automated bots, which are actually picking up the material automatically, labeling them, automated barcode machines, conveyor belts, which are already present in many of the fulfillment centers today, in India as well. And very, very few human intervention, right? All devices being tracked. Today, even the last delivery boy actually carries a smartphone with him, where he's taking digital signatures on the smartphone itself, right? So from a physical POD, we have already moved to a digital POD kind of a setup, because it is not scalable. Where will you store all the PODs for all the 4 to 5 lakh shipments on a day? So I think that is how the technology is evolving. I think going forward, automated systems by using bots in your fulfillment centers. Second is real-time tracking of all the packages which have been handed over to the logistics people. And customer communication are the 3 places where all these systems will really evolve at a very great speed, including barcode solutions where, at an item level, you can track, where is that item really at any given point in time. So real-time tracking will become very, very important as the volumes grow, so that you can pinpoint, where the issues are, solve for the bottlenecks and scale better.
Thanks, Karthik. So changing gears a bit, talking about now about the various operating models that have been existing and how logistic companies have geared themselves up over a period of years now. Not that e-commerce has been here for a very long time, but because the e-commerce companies are heavily dependent on the logistics business. How have and this question is to you, Sainath. Because you've been in eBay, and eBay has been the first, so to say, the person who is the company who has really come to India and created that platform. So how do you see, the logistics business, changing their operating models over a period of time, whether it is managing many things in-house versus maybe outsourcing bits and parts of, in the evolution journey, so to say, because as you grow, you create arms. Some of the large e-commerce companies that are in India are creating, as we were discussing, just before the panel started. They are creating their own logistic arms, right? So do you see outsourcing being a very core function that will be happening as a, giving away core functions out to, the outsourcing companies? How do you see the changes?
I think that has already happened. Like if you look at all the top e-commerce players today, most of them are operating on an outsource model. So we all acknowledge the point that logistic is a key differentiator, key influencer to the growth of e-commerce, and a key differentiator to customer service. So Abhijit spoke about NPS, right? One of the key aspects there, if you look at the way NPS is designed, is also on the shipping experience, right? So therefore, logistics became extremely critical from a e-commerce success standpoint. Now, if you look at models which are currently there and how they have evolved, so initially it used to be the traditional logistic players, right? The Blue Dart, FedEx, and other companies here. So those would be the guys who typically support the e-commerce companies to cater to their fulfillment. Then we realized that the requirements of a buyer, of an online buyer, is very different from what an offline buyer typically expects, right? So it required a lot of customization. COD was, for example, one customization that was required, right? The other customization was on the return management, which we spoke about, where I as a buyer buy an item, I want to then return it back. You can't expect me to pack that item, have a label, so on and so forth. That's where it evolved to the logistic player taking a pre-printed label to the buyer. All that buyer needs to do is give that parcel, right? So logistic player will do everything right from checking the contents of the parcel, putting that prepaid label, packing it and shipping it back to the seller. But the traditional players were not geared to do that, and that's what gave rise to a lot of companies having their own captive logistic arms, right? Which is what you refer to as the in-house logistics. But again, there are challenges with in-house because scalability will always be a problem. It's capital intensive. And that's where the pure play e-commerce logistics service providers started evolving, right? So if you look at the overall model today as it exists in the e-commerce world, there are largely three models, right? One, in-house model. B, it's the traditional logistics service providers. And fourth are the specialist e-commerce service providers. But largely, it's always an amalgamation of all three. It's a hybrid model that e-commerce company operates in. Depending upon what's been the focus category for that particular e-commerce company and what are the challenges, it always blends between the three. Another interesting development which we are seeing happening in logistics pertaining to e-commerce is evolution of 4PL. There is a growing recognition with all the e-commerce players today that we need to stick to our core competence, right? We shouldn't be getting into logistics because that's not what we are traditionally supposed to do. And that is giving rise to a lot of these 4PL players who typically take up all the shipments which are there with a logistic provider or with an e-commerce company and then cater using the 3PL model on top of that. So there is an additional layer which is coming. So that's how I think the model has evolved over the last 5-6 years.
Another interesting, just to
Sure.
add, I've seen another interesting model that's coming up is a lot of long tail e-commerce companies who do like 50, 100, 25, 30 shipments every day. And not too many companies are interested to work with them because it's too challenging. And there's a group of companies that just come in as aggregators. All they're doing is working with these small guys and then just creating that demand pool of these 25, 30 guys who are doing small shipments and then figuring out a way to solve their problem. So that's the very interesting new aggregator of small e-commerce companies who's coming in. And in the likes of eCard, we prefer to work with those guys than the 25, 30 shipments because it's just difficult to work with small players.
It is important also to give support to the overall ecosystem.
Correct.
And it helps everybody to grow in the space because just a few players, handful of players coming up always, it always has a skewed outcome also.
Correct.
So moving on from there, I have been ignoring the left-hand side for quite some time. So moving on from there, Sandeep, this question is to you. What are the key success factors across different segments? So whether it is first mile, last mile, fulfillment centers, and so on. What from a logistics company perspective? You are from DHL. I know you didn't like the reference to your competition here.
I'm saying weather neutral. I didn't take the name of a single website, right? So I said internet. My mother says internet. Yes. All right. So one point, some very, very wise comments made by my co-panelists, and I was making notes. Just add on, build on to what you said about e-commerce company using NPS. I think all great companies today are on their journey from good to great using NPS, and NPS is becoming more real time when the interaction happens than later. And it's such a beautiful tool to get feedback and act upon it. And wonderful comments on notion of time. Fantastic. And I also picked up something when one of the participants was talking about takeaways from this. So I'll possibly talk about some takeaways that are happening today for businesses when they're getting into e-commerce, and more so, as I said earlier, when they're trying to tap international markets. So solutions available today, and some of the solutions are solutions like how do you offer landed cost when you are selling to 200 countries on your website. And therefore, today solutions are available which automate. Now, this is very, very tricky. Hey, it's so difficult doing business in India. How can I do business in 220 countries? But today, solutions are available when you're offering products, and these solutions compute the landed cost. So when your customer in these 200 countries is buying from you, he knows the final cost that's going to cost him. And these are beautiful solutions. Another challenge that we as DHL saw when e-commerce started growing, and Sainath was one of the reasons of putting that challenge to us, was that, you see, in India, when you go and deliver during the daytime, somebody's at the home all the time. But in developed economies, when you go and deliver, nobody's at home. The father's gone for his job, mother's gone for his job, children are somewhere else, and the house is locked. The bigger challenge is in countries like Australia and the US, distances are so long, so the cost per delivery is so high. And if you have to go and redeliver, the cost shoots up. So you can't, the business model then starts falling down. So we developed solutions like on-demand delivery. The shipment hits the airport in the US, email hits the consignee, and the email asks him, what is your preference for delivery? You want delivery as such and such? You tell me a choice of delivery, and we go. So it's called on-demand delivery. It's a concept which is now taking home when we're going and delivering. There are concepts in Germany, for instance, which are called pack station. And I think our sister company, Blue Dart, has also launched that in Gurgaon to begin with.
Right.
And what happens in a pack station is that if you are expecting your parcel to come in from one of the websites, you get an SMS saying, hey, this is your code. And you know that pack station is 1 kilometer away from your house. You go to the pack station whenever you have time. So there's a term called people who have problem with time. So you're working, or you're a student, and you can't go in the daytime, and you can't wait for the shipment to come to you. So you go to a pack station, and there are thousands of these pack stations in Germany now which we've put up. You go to the pack station, on the screen you punch your code, opens up one locker somewhere, and you take your material and go away. And you can do the same when you're sending stuff back, so returns management happen. And the latest is that we just did a test run from Jan to March in Germany on the third generation of, we call it Parcelcopter, but the drones. Wherein what Parcelcopter does is that it automatically works with the pack station. So therefore, it's complete robotics built into it. The parcel goes into the Parcelcopter, it's a drone, it flies to the pack station. This automatic unloading of the parcel into the pack station, or loading into the drone from the pack station. These kind of concepts are developing, and I think drones in India are fairly regulated by DGCA and the local municipal laws, but still I think these are very helpful concepts. And I earlier referred to some international benefits coming. A couple of things I want to refer to, if I may, which is from the point of Indian regulation, right? So I think when GST happens and all of us are eagerly awaiting, it looks far better reality now than earlier. I think it really, really will help e-commerce, not only domestically, but from an international standpoint also. So there are e-commerce chains now opening up, which are looking at sourcing international goods for the Indian consumer. Yeah, and it's very difficult, you know. And therefore, but I think it's a matter of 3 to 9 months, 12 months when this market will start exploding. And this will also possibly help returns management from an international standpoint, because, and one thing, if I may leave behind with the e-commerce companies to work with regulatory, is how do you make sure that an efficient returns process starts working where you can, you don't have to pay duty when the goods come back to India, right? So I think that regulation still needs to be developed in a country like India, and that will really help a lot of e-commerce budding companies, because they just can't handle returns. They have to either give it away for free or destroy it. So I think returns is a big challenge from an international logistics standpoint. So that's a regulatory paradigm which I think we are envisioning will hopefully become more clearer in the next 12, 18, 20 months. But companies like you will have to play a big role in that. Yeah.
Do you see, as Flipkart, do you see drones coming in quickly?
Not in
I
India.
think from a customer delivery perspective, it's still a long way away, as you
Yeah.
can see in even international countries, because there's too many complexities with that happening and drones being misused for other purposes. But I can definitely see drones coming in very soon within boundaries. So warehouses, possibly one easy area where drones can have immediate usage. And I can definitely see there the highest possibility, at least within a country like India, drones coming in pretty soon. When you talk of the whole logistics setup in India. While we keep on hearing about drones being experimented in the US and UK to do customer deliveries, I think we are still,
Some time away.
there's too many challenges around that that I can foresee.
But hopefully with the regulations being played out rightly, as Sandeep said, hopefully over a period of time, if not many years, maybe over a period of time, shorter duration, we'll see probably drones also coming in sooner than later.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my last question, Karthik to you, Neeraj to you, is how can logistics players, predict demand? Because the demand, prediction is really at the e-commerce end. How do you integrate with an e-commerce player to try and predict the demand? Because if they do not let you know what their demand cycle is and how the spurt is going to be and the lack is going to be, then it is very difficult for you to manage your business, right? Because you have to be ready all the time. They are going to rely on you and they have a contract with you and they expect you to deliver all the time because you are not the face to the customer. The Flipkarts of the world are the face to the customer, right? So how do you manage in these difficult times to predict your demand?
Sure. So before I answer to that question, I have two more points to make, one specifically on the customer experience and other on the cost. And I think this alludes to the answer to the next question too. And I think when we spoke about the customer experience today, I heard things like, what's important to a customer in terms of promise that a company makes in terms of speed, product quality, and even data for that matter in terms of information flow. And I think the third aspect, which is, the third aspect of the triangle in terms of what makes it important for a customer experience is the service quality. You have a person who actually steps on your door, the way he greets, the way he smells, the way he dresses. I think this is something which is very important. And if you take a look at from a back-end perspective, it again goes back to what are the processes and what is the collaboration you have with your logistics partner, what are the processes you set in, what are the training aspects that you put on ground to finally deliver the right customer experience. So that was one point which I had on the customer experience, that is, it's not only about information flow, which is important, it's also about product quality, but it's also about the service quality, that is the touch point, the human touch point between the representative of your organization and the customer. On the cost side, I think, what's really I see now with the amount of infusion of IT, the amount of infusion of processes in delivering logistics of e-commerce deliveries to customers. With a lot of infusion around this, there's a huge amount of transparency which is coming in and collaboration, of course. And it's not only a collaboration between the company and the logistics provider, it's also collaboration between two competitors.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, all we are looking at is reaching a same PIN code with X number of deliveries. Now, there is absolutely no sense in three different large companies trying to build parallel value chains or supply chains. The idea is with the right amount of non-competing thought process, the idea with the right amount of non-disclosure agreements in place, the right transparencies in place. What is coming as a forefront differentiator for a logistics provider is, can a logistics provider promise a common pipe to a particular PIN code, to a particular building, to multiple e-commerce companies with the right thought process that information is protected as a promise. So I think those were the 2 points I wanted to make on the customer experience and the cost front from the past discussion. Coming to the question in terms of how do you predict demand and I think that's it's been a great learning curve for us when we work with our customers. And again, I think we have gone back to the principles of manufacturing where we've taken a lot of thought process from the traditional SNOP. And I think the first thing first starts is the right planning in terms of how far before a particular program is laid out by a company, how fast you can start understanding, what are the programs being laid, what is the vision of this particular program or a sale or a festive season. Take a look at analytics from the past, data from the past in terms of, what was the response last year or the year before. Now that we have started doing this a couple of times, we started understanding those things. And when we plan it out, we also plan it out by, the type of product, categories, nodes and whatnot, so that we start looking at which are the possible bottlenecks which could be, which require a higher level of attention and which require a lesser level of attention. So categorization of the right nodes, as we call it, in terms of planning. So I think planning and discussions with the customers is paramount. Then, of course, is the entire execution part, and in terms of understanding that, when you hit the D-Day, what are the 3 or 4 key aspects that you need to plan before that. So again, a proper execution plan which is agreed with the customer, I think that's the key. I think the third most important thing, and the most important thing I should say, whenever we take a look at peaks, is exception management. And exception management, again, comes through strong processes and transparency. Making sure that if anything, so you may have a huge blip or you may have a huge downfall. And again, how are you transparent with your end customer? And I think you made a point that you may promise a customer a delivery of 3 days, but if you are able to communicate to them and say because of X, Y, Z reasons, it is not 3 but 4, and if you tell them well in advance, it is perceived as a good practice. A non-transparent behavior, on the other hand, is actually perceived as a dilution to the service delivery. And I think it's same the other way around, in terms of how transparently you can exchange information between the product supplier, the e-commerce company, as well as the logistics service provider. So I think this is the third most key cornerstone. So planning, execution, and the last aspect which I think I have seen, which has started working very well now with the amount of aggregation of information and the information exchange which is happening between all the parties, comes the thought process of incentivization. So, you have a driver and you have a delivery boy who's actually forsaking his particular time and making sure he's available for that particular job. So, find out who are the right people who do the right job in the right given SLA and then incentivize them. A small incentivization goes in a long way in terms of improving the end customer delivery and making sure that the person on the job stays committed to that. So I think these are the 3 or 4 areas by which we plan well, exception management, and then making sure that the right incentives are doled out in situations which call for those 3 extra steps.
I think
just
that's,
to add on the planning side.
yeah, we actually are running a bit short on time. We have a senior dignitary sitting here.
Okay.
So maybe the question answer session, which we were hoping to cover a bit, maybe I'll request the panelists to be around for the lunchtime.
Okay.
So that if anybody has a specific question, you can reach out to the panelists. I will also try to be around. But thank you, thanks a lot for your time. I think pretty valued comments, and we'll probably now conclude the session.
Thank you.
Here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have mementos for you, ladies and gentlemen. I request Mr. Rishi Kapoor to kindly come forward and present the mementos to you. Request all of you to kindly stay back on the stage, please. Yes, the mementos for all our speakers here.